Welcome back to Mr. Hewitt's pre-press class, print 75 and 77 at Fullerton College, located in your comfortable living room or bedroom, wherever it is your computer is. Today we are looking at gradients in Illustrator. A gradient is a graphic where you transition from one color to another as smoothly as possible. The computer handles the smoothness, don't worry. You can control it though. This video is going to answer technical questions, the questions of how do you make a gradient and how do you use it and how does it print correctly or incorrectly? The questions of should I and why would I are not answered in this video. Gradients are somewhat controversial in design and not always used on the best of products. So you want to be cautious in your use of them in the real world. But I like them mostly for illustration purposes rather than for logo purposes. Excuse me. So let's take a look at how to make these work. This image you're seeing here, you may have already noticed, is going to be the same as the JPEG I sent you that you're going to try and match. But rather than just pulling this apart, let's go and start from scratch. Yep, the right thing is showing. Can never be too sure with these screen shares. If your gradient palette menu is not already open, like mine always is, you will in Illustrator go up to I have something over it. There we go. Window, Gradient. You see mine's already checked. Gradients can now be applied to strokes and fills. They didn't used to do both. Now they do both. Hooray? How cool is that? Okay, anyways, in the gradient menu, if you have a object selected, you go look at your menu toolbar on the left here, and you can see you have your fill and your stroke. Make sure your fill is selected if you're doing the fill. And then in the gradient menu, you click one to build it. This creates a gradient inside as the fill color. It's instead of a color, it's several colors all blending into each other. So the basic one, the default is black to white or white to black, depending on which direction you're reading it. And it starts with white on one side. You can look in the menu here. There's white on one side of it. There's black on the other side of it. And you can move things around. If you move one of these points, you can see in the corresponding, let me zoom in on this actually over here so it looks better on the video. You can choose both where each color lives in this gradient, as well as adjust the midpoint so that it stays one color longer and then abruptly changes, or stays the other color longer and abruptly changes towards an edge. There are multiple types of gradients you can use as well. The default is a side-to-side linear gradient. It goes from one side to another. One of the changes you can do with this is there's a little, what looks like an eyeball here. The angle. You can change the angle either by numbers that are already built in, so that which direction or which axis is the gradient happening on. It can also be done freeform. You can go up and down with arrow keys, or you can type in whatever number you want. 199 degrees, yeah, let's do it. Goes back to 180. But anyways, you can go up to 180 degrees off normal axis using the angle button. You can see at 30 degrees, I'm now going from a corner to a corner, more or less. And it's a diagonal gradient as far as where it's going to and from. You can also hit a quick reverse button. Again, if you're not selected, nothing happens, haha. So if you're clicked on your box that has it in it, you hit reverse, and it swaps which section is which in the gradient, which is quite nice. So this is just the first, most basic shape. The basic gradients, and the ones that have been around since the beginning of Adobe Illustrator, are what I would want to call linear in any case. Even though the radial ones are still a single one-dimensional line where you start at one color on one side and end with another one on the other side. They've recently added a new one, which we'll look at a little bit here, although I still prefer an older tool that does what I think a better job. So you have the type. We have the linear gradient, which starts on one side and goes straight to the other side, depending on what angle you send. The next one is a radial gradient, which is just like this, but instead of being a line from one side to another, it starts and becomes the radius of a circle and spins around to make a circle. So you start with one color in the center and another color at the peripherals. And you can change, just like you did in the other one, where the start points and end points are and what it does. This looks better on a circular background for sure. You can change the angle, which does nothing unless you also change the ratio of how circular or elliptical your shape is that it's making. So this is still basically taking that same line of white to black. It just spins it around and around to make the circle. Yeah, 100. The other one that's new is really interesting, and it's called Freeform Gradient. This is new for the 2020 version. I've not seen it before. So, oops. Undo. So let's go ahead and make this sure we're selected before I do anything. Freeform Gradient brings up what's actually more of a two-dimensional gradient. So instead of just interplaying from one color to another in a straight line, you have multiple points, 3 or more. I think you can get rid of one of these, right? Yes, you can have 3 or more, or even just 2. You can still have 2 gradient points and move them around. And instead of just being from one to another, wherever you have a point, it will work between the different ones. In the freeform gradient, it's all happening for you WYSIWYG down here. So if I click on any one of these, I can select and then apply a color to it. Preschool is getting loud out there. You can add reds, you can see what it's doing. And this one over here, if we make it a very distinctly different color, you can see that these things are all very much battling against each other over the space of where their color is going to end. Where does their influence end and the next one start? Kind of like when you're driving in the middle of nowhere and you're between 2 radio stations and one starts to fade out and another one starts to overpower it. That's what you're talking about when you're going in and around in these things. You're taking a road trip in the middle of nowhere and the radio is a changing. I just did something. There we go. You can also see around these, there's a little radius with a thing. And if you click and drag, you can increase the amount of influence and how far your color is going to travel for each one of these points. And this is fun and convenient and WYSIWYGgy, and you can use these different points to control it. But honestly, I still find there's more control using the mesh tool, which might be a next video. Let me cleanse the world here and start over with a new one because it's going to be hard to come back from that. Basic gradient, because I want to show you another tool they've added more recently. There's also the gradient tool, which does similar things. If you click on Edit Gradient, you then get a slider bar, which is just like the one over here in the middle of the actual object it's in. So it's very much in place, in situ, WYSIWYG. It has a little diamond on top, which does just like the other one. It moves where the colors are on the line. You can move the actual color points on the line. Maybe it's more visual if I do the black one. It'll be easier to see. See, there's a hard line almost of where it suddenly transitions to gray from black, and everything behind it is its color. You can rotate it too, and it will change which direction your gradient is going. I like WYSIWYG. It's a great thing that makes a lot of this stuff more, not just easier, but more fun. I like being able to see what I'm doing while I'm doing it. You used to have to do all of this by faith and by memory. If you use the gradient tool from your toolbar, the gradient tool lets you draw these freeform based off the gradient that you have selected. It will draw it however you do. You click and you drag, and that applies a gradient from a start point to an end point. So that is how those basic things go. Now, next, let me take us to different colors, because this is where it gets interesting to me, at least. The basic default gradient is going to be black to white. We've said that a bunch. But on the gradient slider down here, which we should keep this highlighted or it won't work, you can either edit by double clicking one of these endpoints and choosing a swatch color, or even choosing a eyedropper color. You can choose a pixel from somewhere in your screen if you want. Say, I really like that gray right there, and it becomes that gray. Or you can double click it and you can say, yeah, well, let's just go cyan. And you make cyan your color. And you can do that to the other one too. You can tell it what you want. Not my favorite gradient. Ugh, not wonderful. And we're going to talk about this too in a bit, because this is a tricky one to get a good look on. We'll show you how that falls flat better in a bit. You can also click at any midpoint along this slider And any point you click, it chooses the color that's already there as a middle tone on a gradient. This is also a way of cheating. If you want to find a good color that's between two colors, you just want to take it and make a swatch out of it, you can say, well, obviously I'd be lying if I said I like that color. Let's put a new one down here. Let's say you're trying to build the perfect orange. So let's make this color, I'm gonna get the trash can to get rid of that one. Let's make this yellow. So now we're going from red to yellow. And let's say we want to choose the most perfect orange ever that we really like. We could go ahead and just double click this, use the eyedropper, and choose right here a color. And now the color that we've chosen is available, and we can look into that and turn it in. Actually, and that becomes the color we had done, and we can look at what it is and actually take that color and use it somewhere else. Anyways, that's just a side note. I'm sorry to tangent myself to death here. The fun thing is you can actually drag and drop additional colors from the swatch menu down into this to create other color points within your system. And if you don't like the order, if red to green to yellow looks weird, then move the yellow over, and you can move these, and then just like when you only had two, there's a diamond on top, and that controls how far the mix goes before it becomes the next one. So you're able to adjust all these things. And if you don't like a color, you want to get it out of your design, you don't like that purple, you can either hit the trash can or you can just click and drag it off the slider and it's gone. No more problem. See a lot of screen printed posters around town with this kind of artwork, red to yellow to green. It's a popular kind of gradient to do. So anyways, that's the basics to gradients on this. You can choose colors that you like. I will do one last thing on this video before we call it a video. And that is, did you know you have built-in gradients? There are three basic ones going on in here. Black, white, orange, yellow, and fading sky. Oh, fading sky is nice. I like the sky ones. The fading sky one, and these are the basics, shows an interesting thing that we'll talk about next time when we talk about problems and solutions and interesting things you could do with it. But there's also, if you go to your libraries and you're going through your swatch libraries, there is a gradients library full of gradients of all different types. They've added more since last time I looked. A couple things that I really do like from this are metals and sky. The sky ones are kind of fun and relaxing. All sorts of great colors for sunsets, different daytime skies. It's all very fun to work with. I like these a lot. I use them in illustrations. Maybe not as the whole thing, but to help me along. They are a lot of fun to work with. Another one that's helpful, just because clients ask for this stuff, go back to the gradients, is metals. This is where you're going to find things like gold. And, well, they probably aren't going to ask for pewter or tin, but these different colors and these different things can be used to create kind of metallic looks. Obviously, they can look a little cheesy and they're not perfect, but it's a pretty useful thing to go to. Also, because if nothing else, you can always steal the colors and what's in any point on this. So if you really like some of these golds, you could come in here and say, yeah, well, let's double click on this, click on the little palette on top instead of the swatches, and it tells you what the CMYK build is of that color. So you can go ahead and use this. You can even click, no, you can't. I lied. But anyways, you're able to come down and do this sort of thing and pull out the colors from your gradient and use them other places. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for video number 2 of gradients.